I farmed the family farm of an Irish immigrant who came to this country back in the 1870s, a railroad worker who went by the town of Harvel just to our east here, and he went ahead and went to Alton, came back to the settlement of Shipman, married a young woman, and came up to Harvel and started farming. The interesting thing about the farm, I probably farm the poorest quality land in Harvel Township. The Irish immigrant got here a little too late, and as a result, didn't get the best ground. And I do have 12 acres of highly erodible, and if you look at the topography of Harvel Township, to have a highly erodible field is almost impossible. We've got 12 acres that I farmed that's highly erodible. But that's the background. Basically, I grew up on a livestock farm. When my grandfather got married, he bought 80 acres and started farming across the section from where I live now and where I grew up, ended up growing up at. And it was a livestock farm. And that's important. When I say that's important, is because the residual nutrition from all that manure applied to 80 acres, I can still reach into, because of cover crops today, reach in and get some of that nutrition back that's been tied up in the clay mineral of the soil. So it's kind of an interesting comparison, because on the old Lyons farm it was limited livestock and mostly just crop production. But on the home farm where I grew up at, we had hogs, cattle, sheep, and that's what I was raised on. And everything settled around the livestock we were raised on that farm, because we literally walked the corn crop off the farm. Conservation started for me back in 1975. Lake Lou Yeager was formed actually in the late 60s. And my entire farm, with the exception of that 140 I farmed for the Krager family, all flows into Lake Lou Yeager. And back in 1976, I was shown a report that the Illinois Water Survey had surveyed the work of the lake and determined that Lake Lou Yeager was the fastest silting in lake in the state of Illinois. And that was where all my farm ground was going to, I calculated. And I was at a moldboard plow at that time. Had a brand new one, brand new tractor, brand new moldboard plow, used it for 2 years and parked it and went to chisel plowing and corn stalks going to soybeans. I started no-tilling corn into soybean stubble in 1976, and as a result of that, that's how I began. And I've been a no-till, strip-till farmer continuous since 1987. And then in 2003, I was asked to speak on that strip-till bar in Cincinnati at the National No-Till Conference. And that was my first real experience of knowing that what I was doing was the right thing, because my yields jumped. I used fall anhydrous at that time and put it all down in the fall and had everything done, really just went in and planted, sprayed, once, twice, combine. That was what it meant. It was important to me, because my time was being spent at the same time when all this was happening. I had 100 sows farrow to finish. So between teaching at Lincoln Land, farming 600 acres, and 100 sows farrow to finish, I needed all the time I could get. Some days I needed 26 or 28 hours instead of 24. But that's how I got started. My concern is that everyone still wants to stay with the old what Grandpa did, and we've got to change that culture. When you talk about the hypoxic zone and the loss of nutrients, you have erosion with bare soil. You don't have the erosion with the cover crop. Wind, it breaks, stops the wind. You don't have the water running off. The cover crop makes it more absorbent, and as a result, you do a couple of things. Cover crop gives you cooler, no-till gives you cooler, reduces the nutrients going down to the Mississippi and to the Gulf of Mexico, and you don't kill people with dust storms. Soil aggregation is not what something most people think about. That's the key to having a successful erosion control program. Right now, the practices that some of us are using are the practices of the future. And I'll tell you the reason why I say that is there is no real profit in farming at $4.50 corn and $12 or $13 soybean prices per bushel. There's no profit. So if you can't make a profit at those prices, then what do you have to do? You're going to have to cut that back on your inputs. Do you want to cut back on your fertility input? I don't. Not if I'm keeping it on the land. I don't want to lose it, but I don't want to cut back because that's going to affect my yield. Am I going to cut back on my populations? Probably not. If I want those top yields. The bigger the yield, the better chance you're going to have to break even. I'm going to cut back on my other inputs like machinery. To give you some example, I'm looking at purchasing a piece of equipment. I'm going to need to purchase it with some neighbors because it's a unique piece of equipment. It puts P and K down below and makes a strip in the fall of the year, and you've got all your nutrition right below where you're going to plant your corn. That's going to cost me some money. It's going to cost me right at $200,000. I can't afford that on my small acres, so I'm going to get together with some area farmers that believe in strip till, and we're going to attempt to purchase one together. But where I'm going with this is you got to have something to pull at. Right now, the price of a quad track Case IH 700 plus horsepower tractor is the first one I've seen with a list price of over $1 million. You cannot afford to run $1 million tractor with corn prices of $4.50 and $13 for corn and soybeans respectively. That's where we're going to see people make the change, because the equipment costs are going to be so expensive that you better cut back someplace, and the way to cut back is how much equipment you're using, and the no-till, strip-till is the answer. And then it's also the answer to reducing erosion, reducing nutrient loss, reduction of dust. What's important to me is to make the most yield. I mean, I find I'm driven by yield. But I don't have the answer to how to make people change. But I can show people what I'm doing and show them my records where my returns are greater. But yet, I'm not a big farmer. And they'll say, oh, you can do that because you're small. I do that whether I had 3,000 acres, 30,000, or 300. I do the same things. I never knew how I did, really. I thought I was doing pretty good, but I never knew how I did until 18. And we had to report our yields for our Trump dollars. And I got audited for my yields. The concern was at the FSA committee that they would be audited by the feds when they turned in their numbers. I found out that year I had 296 bushel average for the farm in corn. It was number one in the county. I had 93 bushel beans in soybean average. That was fourth in the county. I had 97 bushels of wheat. That was first in the county. When you got over 450 farmers in the county and you're 1, 4, and 1 with those practices, I'm sold on what I'm doing.